I was silent for 63 years. 63 years ago, something happened that has haunted me my entire life. I've never told anyone about it until today. Now, officially, I'm an old man. For the last couple of years, I've been comforting myself by saying I'm barely 70. But math is a simple and ruthless thing. Today, I turned 75. God, how time flies. I'm not here for congratulations. This milestone brings me no joy. Of course, I'm glad I'm still alive, but with each passing year, I feel like there's less and less to live for. My bones ache, my kids are far away, and the other half of the bed has been empty for 8 months now. So keep your happy birthday to yourself. I'm here because I want to tell you a story. A story I've never told before. I used to think I stayed silent because it sounded foolish, or because no one would believe me. But the older you get, the harder it is to lie to yourself. To be completely honest, I never told anyone because it scares me, almost to death. Though now, death doesn't seem so frightening anymore. So listen, it was 1950. The setting, a small town in Maine. I was 9, a scrawny little kid with only one friend in the whole wide world, and then his family suddenly decided to move 2,000 miles away. Everything pointed to this being the worst summer of my life. My dad had long vanished, and my mom was always nagging me about chores, so I had no desire to stay home. After some hesitation, I decided the library was the best place to spend my summer. There weren't many books, especially for kids, but within those boring walls, I was free from household duties, my mom's nagging, may her soul rest in peace, and most importantly, from other kids I'd have to talk to. I was the only kid from such a low social class spending his vacation among bookshelves, and that suited me just fine. The first half of the summer was even drearier than I'd expected. I'd lie in bed until 10, do chores, then ride to the library on my bike, or rather, a rusty piece of junk with 2 wheels. There, I'd alternate between accidentally and deliberately annoying the elderly patrons. One particularly polite lady, fed up with my endless tongue clicking, hissed through her teeth, "Shut the hell up." It was the first time I heard an adult say that word with a B. Now it's nothing, but back then, it was unheard of. Boring days turned into dreary weeks. I started seriously praying for school to start soon. But then, one day, I discovered the basement. You'd think I'd explored every inch of that library. But one day, in a far corner behind the foreign language shelves, I stumbled upon a small wooden door that definitely wasn't there before. That's how it all began. The door had no windows, was made of oak, and looked far older than the wall itself. It had an old black handle, so ancient I wouldn't be surprised if it was forged in the 17th century. Engraved on the handle was a single footprint, the mark of a bare foot. I immediately felt that something forbidden lay beyond that door, which meant it was the most interesting thing that would happen to me that summer. I looked around, made sure no one was watching, turned the heavy handle, slipped inside, and shut the door behind me. There was nothing but darkness. I took a couple of steps and stopped, disoriented by the absolute blackness surrounding me. I waved my hands in front of me, hoping to touch a wall, a shelf, anything to hold on to. But I found something else entirely. A thin cord dangling from above, small, almost imperceptible, but very useful. Back then, many light bulbs were turned on with a cord, and this was one of them. I pulled, and a dim light flickered on. I stood on a small, dusty platform that looked like it hadn't been visited in years. To my left was an old, creaky wooden spiral staircase, seemingly ready to collapse at any moment. The bulb was the only source of light, and there wasn't much of it, so when I peered over the railing, the steps quickly vanished into darkness. I was getting scared. This place, wherever I was, didn't feel like part of a regular town library at all. It was as if I'd stepped into an entirely different building, but no 9-year-old boy would pass up the chance to solve a mystery. Now, I'd gladly tell my younger self to turn around, go back, do anything but go down that staircase. It would save you countless sleepless nights. But of course, I didn't know anything back then. and I probably wouldn't have listened even if I did. So instead of leaving, I took a deep breath, gripped the railing, and with determination, stared down, beginning my descent. The wood on the railing was dry, full of splinters. I quickly let go, continuing downward with my arms outstretched for balance. The staircase was, or seemed, very long, and the only dim light came from the bulb far above. My heart was pounding like crazy in the total darkness. I think even kids have that gut feeling when something's wrong. They just tend to ignore it more often. When my feet finally touched the concrete floor below, the light from the bulb above was barely noticeable, but a new source of light appeared, and God, I'll never forget it. Right in front of me was a door, massive, a deep burgundy color. Light seeped from behind it, thin strips glowing ominously along all four sides, forming a faintly luminescent rectangle. For the second time that day, I took a deep breath and stepped through a door I shouldn't have. Unlike the damp, dusty room I came from, the room beyond was blindingly bright. When my eyes adjusted to the light, what I saw took my breath away. It was a library. The most perfect library you could imagine. In complete awe, I took a step forward, almost reverently. It was beautiful. It was smaller than the library upstairs, much smaller, but it felt like it was made just for me. The shelves were packed with books and vibrant covers. The two armchairs in the middle of the room looked incredibly comfortable, and the smell, God, that smell, was simply unimaginable. Something between citrus and pine needles. I can't describe it in words, but in all my 75 years, I've never smelled anything more wonderful. What was this room? Why had I never heard of it? Why was no one here? Those are the questions I should have asked myself, but I was intoxicated. As I browsed the books and soaked in the scent of paradise, only one thought swirled in my head: I'd never be bored again. In reality, boredom only retreated for 3 years. Everything changed on my 12th birthday, exactly 63 years ago. Until that day, I visited my underground sanctuary as often as I could, usually a few times a week. I never saw a soul there, but somehow I stayed under the radar. I never took books out of that room, just picked up the same volume I'd left off on during my last visit. I always sat in the same deep purple armchair, leaving its twin across from it empty. That armchair was mine. The other one, back then, I probably couldn't have articulated it clearly, and I still can't now, but it definitely, damn it, wasn't mine. On my 12th birthday, I arrived at the library later than usual. My mom had invited a couple of classmates and some cousins to our house to celebrate, and I found it more exhausting than touching. Honestly, I just wanted to spend my birthday sitting with a book, breathing in the scent of paradise. Finally, the guests left, and I made it to the library about 15 minutes before closing. It didn't matter. The staff never checked the basement before locking up, so I was free to stay as long as I wanted. That evening, I was devouring the final chapters of an epic adventure. Knights, swords, dragons, the works. I didn't notice the smell until I finished the last lines and closed the book. The once exquisite aroma of the room had turned unpleasantly sour. I sat there for a while, feeling uneasy. Objectively, the smell seemed the same, a mix of citrus and pine. I just perceived it differently, and I no longer liked it. It was like an olfactory version of an optical illusion. You know, the kind where you first see a young woman looking over her shoulder, then suddenly an old lady staring right at you. You can't unsee the old lady, and I couldn't unfeel that smell. The spell was broken. For the first time, the smell seemed to come from one specific spot. With growing unease, I started sniffing around the room like an obsessed dog until I reached a shelf in the far corner. It looked perfectly ordinary, except for one book, a large volume in a dark burgundy leather binding with a single black footprint on the spine. That was the source of the smell. I opened the cover and saw a single phrase, neatly written in black and red ink on the first page: "Let go of your sorrows, friend, and do not return to them." Mesmerized, I stared at the phrase, slowly backing toward my armchair. I turned the page, empty. The smell grew stronger. Another page, empty again. and the smell became even more intense. I paused for a moment, fighting a gag reflex, and kept going. As I approached the armchairs, I turned the final page, and there, in the same ominous font, was something I never expected to see: my own name. I dropped the book, bolted for the door, but when I looked up, my breath caught, and I froze in place. The empty armchair was no longer empty. Sitting in it was an elderly man in a suit, legs crossed, with a piercing gray gaze and a slight smirk. That was too much. I collapsed to my knees and vomited right onto the carpet. I wiped my mouth, staring at my own mess, and then I heard the man chuckle softly. I looked at him, unable to believe my eyes. "Who are you?" I asked, my voice trembling with panic. The man stood, gently took me by the shoulders, and sat me back in my armchair. He settled back into his. "I'm afraid we got off on the wrong foot," he said, glancing at the puddle on the carpet. "The smell, it takes some getting used to." "Who are you?" I repeated. "Today, you will know suffering unlike anything you've experienced before," he said. "I come as a friend, offering you refuge from it and from all the storms that lie ahead." More than anything, I wanted to leave, but I stayed seated. I asked what he was talking about. "Your mother is dead, kid, by her own hand, in her own kitchen. Not a pretty sight, I'll admit." He said it with a hint of sadness, but I caught a playful glint in his eyes. "I'm sure you'd like to avoid that path. I can show you a safer way." Those horrific words made my blood run cold, but I didn't believe him. "What do you want from me?" I demanded, trying to sound braver than I felt. He laughed an old, raspy laugh that seemed to rattle his bones. "Nothing but your friendship, my boy," he said. Then, catching the doubt in my eyes, he added, "I want you to join me on a journey. My work is noble, and you'd make an excellent apprentice. Perhaps when I'm done." He sighed wearily and ran bony fingers through his sparse white hair. "Perhaps then my work will become yours." I stood, slowly moving toward the door, never taking my eyes off him. "You're crazy," I said. "My mom isn't dead. She's not dead." "Go see for yourself if you want," he replied, gesturing toward the door. I shot him a defiant glare and dashed for the exit. As my hand grasped the doorknob, he softly said my name. Against my will, I turned back. "Your path won't be easy, my friend. If ever. Whenever." He paused and gestured around the room. "If it becomes unbearable, you know where to find me." I slammed the door behind me and raced up the creaky staircase, skipping steps. I burst out of the library, jumped on my bike, and pedaled home as fast as I could. The front door was wide open. I leapt off my bike, letting it crash to the ground, and cautiously approached the house. The old man lied. He obviously lied, and yet my eyes began to fill with tears. My heart was pounding. I stepped inside and called for my mom. Silence. I turned toward the kitchen. To this day, I don't know why she did it. I've lived my whole life in that small town in Maine. Though I've barely gone near the town library since. Once, in my late 20s, I mustered the courage to go inside. Things were fine then. The fear had gradually turned into idle curiosity. Where the door to my underground sanctuary once stood, there was now just a bare wall. I asked the librarian what happened to the basement, though deep down, I knew the answer. "There's no basement," she said. "There never was. Moreover, according to the records, city building codes prohibited basements in that area altogether." Since that birthday, that sickly sweet smell, a toxic mix of citrus and pine, has haunted me. I smelled it when I saw my mother that day in the kitchen, lying in a pool of her own blood. I smelled it when the man claiming to be my father showed up at my college dorm, begged for money, then beat me nearly to death when I refused. I smelled it when my wife miscarried our second child, and then our fourth. I smelled it when our eldest son, drunk, got behind the wheel of the family Buick and crashed, killing his girlfriend. I smelled it intermittently when my wife got sick. She passed away late last year, and now, for the first time in half a century, I'm alone. Now, I smell it every day, and it's like it's calling me. A few months ago, I went back to the library, and the small oak door with the ancient handle was there again, exactly where it had been before. Since then, I pass by the library every evening, but haven't dared to go inside. Maybe tonight? Yes, I'm afraid of dying, but I've become even more afraid of continuing to live. The old man was right. My path hasn't been easy, and it's unlikely to get easier. Let go of your sorrows, friend, and do not return to them. He promised deliverance, a refuge, as he put it. Maybe he was right about that too. There's only one way to find out. After all, I still know where to find him.